Hey, welcome back. Today we are covering a story that just landed on April 30th, 2026, and it is one of those regulatory decisions that looks technical on the surface, but is actually reshaping a multi-billion-dollar market in real time. The FDA proposed excluding semaglutide, tirzepatide, and liraglutide from what is called the 503B bulks list. If you have been following the GLP-1 story at all, this is the ending of a chapter that started with a manufacturing shortage back in 2022. Here is the first thing you need to understand. U.S. compounding pharmacy law runs on two separate tracks. There is Section 503A, which is traditional pharmacy compounding for individual patients with specific prescriptions, small scale, patient specific, state board oversight. And there is Section 503B, which was created after the New England Compounding Center meningitis disaster in 2013, where contaminated steroid injections killed dozens of people. 503B created a category called outsourcing facilities, bulk producers of sterile compounded drugs operating under direct FDA inspection. To produce at scale under 503B, a facility needs a legal hook. Either the drug is on the official shortage list or the ingredient is on the 503B bulks list based on what the law calls a clinical need finding. Here is the second key point. When semaglutide and tirzepatide hit the shortage list starting around 2022, that opened the legal door for outsourcing facilities to compound these drugs from bulk API at industrial scale. What followed was a full parallel pharmaceutical supply chain, API from overseas manufacturers, outsourcing facilities formulating it into injectable vials, telehealth platforms running consumer acquisition funnels, cash pay obesity clinics offering compounded GLP-1s for somewhere between about $200 and $400 a month, compared to list prices north of $1,000 a month for the branded versions. At the market's peak in 2024, compounded GLP-1s accounted for roughly 30% of total U.S. supply. That is a staggering number for a product category technically operating outside the standard drug approval system. And here is the third point, the one that the April 30 proposal really turns on. Once the shortage is resolved, the question became whether these three drug substances would earn a permanent spot on the 503B bulks list based on clinical need independent of the shortage, and FDA said no. Not only no, but specifically no based on the argument that patient affordability and insurance coverage gaps do not constitute clinical need under the statute. The agency's position is that if approved products exist and work, the clinical justification for bulk compounding disappears, regardless of what those approved products cost. Whether patients can afford them is a problem for payers, employers, CMS, and manufacturers. It is not a problem FDA solves through the compounding pathway. That distinction, clinical need versus economic need, is what makes this story matter far beyond obesity drugs. It sets a precedent for how future debates around high-cost branded drugs and compounding access are going to be framed. We are only covering part 1 of the full analysis today. Part 2 gets into what this means for the telehealth platforms, cash pay clinics, and investors who built real businesses on this supply chain, and whether any of them have a viable path forward. Subscribe to On Healthcare for part 2 and the full analysis, link below.